The NHL offseason train just continues to steam along, with the Dallas Stars making a big extension that might mean one of the biggest potential Jets offer sheet targets is now on that market.
Your Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, obviously, we are chatting a little bit about some of the craziest news stuff that's breaking out of here with this NHL offseason. It continues to roll along, and with the Dallas Stars making a rather big extension and commitment to Matt Duchene, which, mind you, was actually a very good contract, $4.5 million for 4 years. That's $4.5 per season, by the way. That basically now leaves them with about 70 or 50 to 70K in cap space, which is, frankly, nothing. They have no money to work with, and they need to move some salary. This is what we kind of talked about a while back with the Stars. And because the free agent market for centers continues to thin now and is looking a little bit on the rough side, this increasingly points to a lot of teams needing to turn to some other trade markets and stuff. In tonight's show, I want to dive into not only who the Jets could go for in Dallas, but also talk about how this is going to impact Winnipeg's own offseason and what they really need to prioritize here over the next few weeks. But the Dallas Stars, obviously, it's kind of the easiest place to start. Mavrik Bourque has been a guy that I've talked about as being a really intriguing offer sheet target. The problem with Bourque is that traditionally, right, you would look at him maybe in a shorter term perspective if you were just signing a regular extension. With an offer sheet, you'd have to go a little bit into some territory where there's fair bits of risk. And with the Jets not having Winnipeg's second round pick this year, it does kind of make it a little bit tricky, right? You'd have to go for either a very low salary or a higher one. And listen, if Bourque has a chance to choose his destination, it's not going to be Winnipeg if the Jets don't give him a fairly decent contract offer. And that kind of brings up a really interesting dilemma. If the Jets were to try and do an offer sheet, right, you'd potentially have to look at moving your first and your third round pick if you're in like the $4.5 to $7 million range, which is for me where I'd be looking to try and bring Bourque in. Now, a lot of you might say, how on earth would you feel comfortable doing that if you're talking about a guy who has quite literally 74 games of NHL experience? You know, what exactly tells you that this is a guy you need to bring in with a potentially hefty cap hit? In my mind, I think you have to really project here. Bourque is a young 23-year-old center with a great scoring profile. He's a very fast skater. He's got positional versatility. He can play out wide, down the middle, whatever it is you need. And he's very smart, knows how to attack the slot. And when you look at the seasons outside of the NHL, he has been extremely productive everywhere. With the Texas Stars, in his first year or so, he had 47 points in 70 games. Followed that up this past year before this most latest season with the Star with Dallas, of course, with their affiliate in Texas. He had 77 points in 71 games. That's fantastic scoring rates that would easily clear everyone in Manitoba. Although I do wonder how much he'd actually be able to do with this Moose team. You know, the Stars were a lot better than the Moose were. So keep that in mind. But I think it just says a lot about the fact that Bourque himself, in his second full year as a pro, absolutely scorched it. And this past year with the Dallas Stars, he had 25 points in 73 games. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you realize he was playing like 12 and a half minutes, you start to put two and two together, you realize there is a very intriguing player here. And this is likely a guy that Dallas really doesn't want to lose. In fact, I would have to think that they are trying to figure out how to move some salary out first. He's not on the level of a Jason Robertson, but I really don't see a scenario where he doesn't become anywhere from, a 50 to 60 point guy on a routine basis. He seems like a very versatile player, a great forward. He's pesky, not exactly the biggest dude, but skilled, smart, knows how to use his speed and shiftiness laterally to really create some havoc. And I feel like this is a guy who's just looking to create separation and get into those good scoring and shooting lanes. And so for this reason, I really feel like if we're looking at guys that the Jets should really go after aggressively, a Bourque would make a lot of sense. Your second line center question continues to be a bit of a challenge, and maybe Bourque isn't going to be the immediate solution, but if you're looking for the future and longer term, he could be an incredibly important pickup for this Jets team. Now, the offer sheet question gets to be a little dicey. How much do you want to pay him? And I kind of feel like if you can get him to sign a deal in the $6.5 million for 4 or 5 year range, I would be very down with that. That's what I think would make a lot of sense for him. I think it's a very good gamble, especially with the cap going up, and you are likely to get surplus value in the second and even third years of that deal. It's really not hard to envision him coming to Winnipeg and absolutely torching. I think a lot of it kind of tracks with how we've seen with Perfetti, where maybe he had, some really intriguing scoring numbers in very limited fourth line minutes in previous years. Now he's taken on a much bigger role with the Jets, still kind of finding his way, but doing enough to be a fairly consistent contributor on and off the puck. And so Bourque, for me, feels like a very safe bet. Every league that he's been in prior, he has done really good things. And again, basically playing 12 and a half minutes, already racked up 25 points with the Stars. It really feels very likely that he'll hit 40 plus in his following season if he gets to even middle 6 minutes. This is a guy that's primed to explode, and you would potentially be hurting the Stars big time if you make this offer sheet and they can't match, which, listen, you put it in the $6 to $7 million range, that's an offer that they can't do anything with. They'd have to move serious salary, and I just don't see them being able to do that in time, especially when they still have to figure out the Jason Robertson situation. That is very much looming on the horizon for them. Robertson's obviously the much bigger priority between the two, and so for me, if you're looking for a guy that's kind of in that Holloway/Broberg bracket of being on the cusp of a breakout, but their respective team just can't make it happen with the cap situation, this is your time to shine, Chevy. I feel like this could be a great opportunity for the Jets. You are not going to find a center or winger with the potential that Bourque has in free agency. I can tell you that right now. There's just not going to be players who offer not only a very good present impact, but also a fantastic likely future impact. And for the price tag, I think Bourque would be a very sound investment. The first and the third, especially from the upcoming drafts and stuff. Obviously, it may hurt a little bit in the future if a really good prospect falls down the road. But I think for the Jets, right, Winnipeg is in win now mode. They need guys who can contribute, and you would probably be very fortunate if any of those picks becomes what Bourque is right now. So all I can say is I think that this is a great target. I would hope that the Jets are thinking long and hard about this. And if the Stars would also entertain a trade and are willing to do in division, maybe the Jets should just jump the shark and or maybe kind of get ahead of all of this, make an aggressive offer, and kind of see what they can do. Right, Bourque is maybe not going to cost as much as like a Paterka, but he could be a really good player for this Jets team now and in the very long future. So lots to consider with the Bourque situation, but I did mention that the center market itself, already with the free agency rush, is starting to thin out as players are signing extensions with their teams. I want to talk about a guy or two that I think should be on Winnipeg's radar, especially as UFAs continue to get knocked out, and who maybe the Jets should keep in mind in case the Bourque deal or maybe some other departures happen over the next few weeks. But before we dive into all that, did want to shout out our friends and partners at Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. And they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller for longer. As a Marylander, I personally like shelled varieties. I feel like it's just like cracking open a crab, except it's a nut And Wonderful Pistachios come in some great flavors. They've got great seasonings, and they also come in a no-shell variety. So if you're dropping the kids off at school, you need a quick pick-me-up during the 3 p.m. slump or something to get you going before your gym workout, it's a great option. And of course, it's a complete protein packing 9 all-essential amino acids. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's show as we are chatting a little bit about some of the undrafted or unrestricted free agents that are going to be out there. RFAs, we've kind of talked a little bit about with offer sheets. In terms of UFAs and centers, that market is already starting to thin. Some guys are already signing some of their deals, and that does mean that the center market's not looking super great if you're trying to just spend money and not go for some picks and stuff. For the Jets, I've kind of talked about this before. UFA for me is a big no-no for most players. I just don't really want the Jets to spend money, especially on players who probably aren't going to be worth what they're paid. Now, there are a couple of exceptions, and one in particular that has sort of caught my eye and that I do think could be had at a reasonable price. I'm looking at a guy in Vancouver, Pius Suter. Now, Suter's projected from AFP Analytics to get just under $5 million for about 4-ish years, and Suter had, a pretty big breakout season with the Canucks. 29-year-old center, finally playing like 17-ish minutes a night. He posted 46 points in 81 games, had very solid middle six play driving ability. Defensively, he had some responsibility and could occasionally do some special teams work. But the majority of his points production was at 5v5, which I think is really worth pointing out. 25 goals, 21 assists. And when you look at his goal scoring, his shooting percentage obviously had a nice bump this year to 18%. But when you really think about it, he was already shooting around 13%. So it's not like this is some extraordinary outlier. It is obviously well above his career average, but his career average is already really good. So Suter, for me, he's basically been a 35-ish point player for a good chunk of his career. I'd say probably closer to the 30-ish point mark, maybe. But again, he's primarily played, on some rough teams, squads that don't have a lot of offensive talent, and in, I would say, fairly modest minutes the past couple of years, still putting up 25 to 30 points. And now that he had a big breakout year with the Canucks, Vancouver kind of needs to make a tough decision. They don't have a lot to work with. They are trying to figure out what direction the team is going to take going forward. And some of their biggest stars, like, say, Quinn Hughes, might not be on that team forever. So Suter, in a lot of ways, actually makes a lot of sense for a team like Winnipeg, where he's not going to cost you anything other than a cap hit in roster space, and the Jets are going to have both. They also have a legitimate need for a middle 6-2C who can be an upgrade on Nemesnikov, and I think Suter absolutely ticks that box. He's a creative playmaker. He's got a very nice shot. He puts up very respectable results. I think this is a very intelligent signing if the Jets were to pull it off. Now, Winnipeg doesn't often wade into UFA with guys that are on other teams. It's pretty rare that the Jets spend big money on this, and Suter's not going to cost you an arm and a leg, but if you have to lure him to Winnipeg, you might have to up that count, right? You might be looking more in the $5 to $5.5 million range, but I still think that if you get him for 4 or 5 years, you're not going to be disappointed with the results. This is Winnipeg's window anyways, right? The Jets need to be looking at this like their chance to swing big and win. And if you look at maybe some of the other deals out there, maybe Bill Carlson's not going to be available for a decent price. Maybe, Tommy Novak is going to just stay in Pittsburgh. I don't really know what all is going to happen. And so with that in mind, a Suter makes a lot of sense if you can lure him, especially if the price doesn't break the bank. Now, if he starts asking for 6+, yeah, obviously I'd have some hesitation there. It's not like the Bourque situation where, Bourque's got a lot of upside. Suter, I think you can kind of guess where his production's going to go. I think he'll be a very good player, but I wouldn't project him to start just absolutely destroying it in Winnipeg. I think he'll be very good, and I kind of have him very clearly behind Scheifele in that pecking order. So for that reason, I just don't think you want to go whole hog and spend a crazy amount of money. But a Suter makes a very intriguing option, especially when you look at the rest of the UFAs, which are just not that inspiring. For one thing, I think it would be wise for the Jets to let Tanev go. He doesn't even play center anyways, but for some reason, he just keeps getting listed as a center elsewhere. But I mean, outside of that, you look at the center market for the Jets, and there's just not a lot of guys that are out there that are going to be worth spending money on. If there is one other player that could be an interesting option, and this really depends on what his own plan is, it's Claude Giroux. Now, Giroux hasn't played as a center in forever. He doesn't really do it on a routine basis. And, he did kind of move to Ottawa to be closer to family. So I don't really see him coming to a team like Winnipeg at this stage of his career. Now, I could be wrong about that. I thought he would be a very intriguing trade deadline option a while back. That didn't happen. And now he's going to be a free agent with a team that's kind of all over the place. I don't really know what the Sens are doing. I don't know how they view this recent playoff run. I think everyone kind of got a bit of a wake-up call about how good the Panthers are versus the entire East. And so, the Sens may feel like they have some more work to do. But if Giroux does leave and is maybe interested in trying to do a ring chase for maybe 1 or 2 years, I'd just call his agent and see what he's thinking. He's at the age where obviously, he's not young. He doesn't really have many seasons left. And if he does want to go somewhere and try for a ring, why not a President's Trophy team for at least a year or so? I don't know that it would really be, his first preferred destination, but you look at the teams that could realistically bring Giroux in and actually give him the kind of role that he'd want and where he could really shine. And I just don't know that there are many teams that are going to have, the roster and cap space to make it happen. He also, I don't think, would cost you like an arm and a leg, but, if you had a choice between him and like Brock Nelson, I'm taking Giroux. Like, as much as I really liked Nelson as a trade deadline option, if we're talking about a free agent, Giroux is still putting up borderline elite results. Crazy scoring records. He's been fantastic in his two-way game. Despite his age, he has still got it. And I could easily see him being, a marquee signing for the Jets, especially if he would go back down the middle. Now, that part, I just don't know what his plan is. If he does come to Winnipeg, it would probably be as a winger. And, obviously he's not the swiftest these days, but he can still keep up. He still puts up great results. And so I really wouldn't be against that idea. But if he does want to play as a center for the Jets, and would be willing to do so in a contract extension situation, I would be pretty down with that. Bring him in, see what he can do. Maybe he can kind of give you that Paul Stastny-esque presence that the Jets have frankly been missing for some time. So this market, while there aren't many options, there are a few good ones, and I would think the Jets are doing due diligence. Now, I will say that, again, it depends on the contract prices, and there is going to be sticker shock for a lot of people with the cap going up. A lot of folks are going to see these extensions that probably hit over the next few weeks, and their eyes are going to water. But for the Jets, I kind of feel like that also makes it a very prime opportunity to maybe sneak in a good deal somewhere for a player that's maybe getting a really decent market price. And a guy like Suter or Giroux could really help fix the Jets' top six and give them some real balance. They're like part of the way there in a lot of ways, but there's just something that they still need to figure out heading into what's going to be a really pivotal summer. Next year, this Jets team could look very different, and while that may worry some people because you're going to be changing from a President's Trophy team, I'm personally kind of excited. I would love to see what this team looks like. I hope that they just don't run it back, because I feel like we've seen the best of the run it back team, and they were pretty dang good. But we know that when it comes to the playoffs, that's still that last hurdle that they really want to get deep in. And if they have a big offseason, I think they can push even further than they did this past run. So lots to consider and think about. But amidst all of this, I do want to talk about the prioritization and how the Jets should really approach this. I've gotten a lot of interesting comments recently. A lot of people are really focused on a defender, and I'm kind of wondering if I've changed my own tune about that. We'll chat about what the Jets should prioritize first, especially as we approach July 1st and beyond, coming right up. Hey, friends, and welcome back to these closing thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's show as we are chatting a little bit about how the Jets should maybe prioritize their offseason, right? They have a lot of choices to make. Some of them kind of need to be done a little faster than others. The Ehlers one, I kind of feel like we're just going to have to sit and wait and see what happens. July 1st is probably going to be the earliest that we know anything. And if that, doesn't mean a contract with the Jets, it is what it is. Winnipeg just needs to adapt and prepare for whatever outcome happens. But beside all of that, I think one of the earliest decisions the Jets should kind of figure out is what they're doing with Vilardi. Per AFP Analytics, which if you've never seen them, they do some great contract projections. They are usually really on the money when it comes to extension deal. So I don't know if they have insider information or if their model is just that dang good. But they've got Vilardi at around a 4-year deal for like 6.8-ish mil, which is it's not bad. I think if you're the Jets, the only thing that you sort of wonder is, would you want to bring Vilardi back, or do you think that trading him for some center help might make more sense, right? Is there another player who better fits what Winnipeg is doing? And the only reason that I ask this, and I've mentioned it the past couple of episodes, is because Gabe is obviously, a really good player, but I just, part of me wonders if his 5v5 impact hasn't quite been at the level that the Jets need. And with how this team continues to arrange the top line, Vilardi tends to get loaded up with Connor and Scheifele, and I feel like that just isn't the best use of that trio of talent. And so, Vilardi might be able to be a player who brings you a big center of some sort. You could also try Vilardi back at center. It didn't really work in LA, but maybe if he can make it work in Winnipeg, you feel differently about it. But I do have some questions about, what the injuries have done to him, his ability to pivot as much as he used to and win those sort of battles and stuff. And so, there's a lot to me where I kind of look at Vilardi's numbers and sort of his health situation, and I have more hesitance than I did maybe earlier this year. And so I think it's a bigger question for the Jets than maybe folks have let on. I don't think it's an easy answer. I do think the Jets will sign him, and I do expect it to be in that 4 to 5 year range. I sort of wonder what could be if they decide that maybe they need to go a different direction. And if they do, it could lead to a minor blockbuster in Winnipeg terms. Now, the second piece of business, very easy, get the Sandberg deal done. That one, I think they're probably not sweating too much because they already love him. He's going to be making probably in the $5 million range, 5 to 5.5, somewhere in there, 5 or 6 years, easy to see. And get it done, dusted, you're good to go. After that, I really think the Jets need to focus on that 2C spot. Now, I know a lot of you have said it would be better for the Jets to have a top defender, and maybe in previous times I would have agreed. I just kind of feel like with how Winnipeg's blue line is currently set up, at this point, it's good, right? It's very solid. There are going to be moments where it kind of has, maybe a right side that's not as strong as other teams. But the left side is so good to where I don't think that that's nearly as big of an issue as it would have been some time ago. And you're also going to have Salamanson filtering in here sometime in the next couple of seasons. So, instead, focus on offense and keeping the defense less of an issue, right? If your offense is just overwhelming opponents in the OZ, you don't have to worry about having top-end blue liners. I think that's really been key to how the Panthers have built their blue line, is that their forward grouping is just so dang good that what you have on the back end doesn't really matter. Seth Jones was, quite frankly, very bad for the Panthers. Defensively, he put up some of his worst results ever, and that's, after having a really good rebound with Chicago. And coming into the Panthers, he really wasn't the Ekblad replacement that I think folks were hoping for. And yet, it didn't hold them back too much. They still put up crazy goal-scoring records. They really embarrassed the Oilers in the final couple of games in that series. And so I just feel like it shows you the power of having a potent offense, and especially a good top 9 that can challenge and match up against almost anyone in the league. Now, that's not fair to say of the Jets right now with how they're built. Winnipeg doesn't have some of the same luxuries that the Panthers team does, right? And so how they're going to have to build is just fundamentally different. But if you're the Jets and you're looking at what you can do and how you can approach this, I really feel like this is a great opportunity to bring in another center who can really fortify that depth and who can give you more scoring upside than Lowry or anyone else can. Lowry does a great job on the forecheck, and I love him. He's one of my favorite players on this team. He is honestly, as one of the recent captain picks, I feel like he's been one of the best captains we've ever had. I'm very happy that he has worn the C with pride, and I really feel like he's been a great rep for the city. I also will confess that offensively, he doesn't quite have the finishing that you'd probably want from a guy playing behind Scheifele. And so while you could make it work and he might do a really good job alongside or Perfetti and somebody else, I think it would help him out a lot if the Jets are able to bring in some more scoring upside from outside. And that's where I think, this is a Bourque situation. You could look at maybe bringing in, another free agent, or you go to the trade market, like I've said, and you bring in a big name. Now, I do wonder if the Jets are going to try for some serious term. If they do, then maybe they're shopping for the Horvat tier of player. If they are, I don't hate it, but I do have some questions about, if you're spending big assets on like a 30-year-old plus guy, how quickly do they start to hit those performance walls? And is it going to hurt the Jets in the present and future? And how, quick is that crash going to happen? I want the Jets to be flexible and have a strong enough foundation to keep supplementing around the margins. That's how the 17-18 team really found its stride. And I think a future Jets team could do a very similar thing, so long as Chevy is smart about what he does this offseason. I had a comment on the last episode that talked a little bit about, maybe us saying it's going to be the summer of Chevy and being disappointed. I do want to challenge that one a little bit. I do feel like the past several years, from Chevy's perspective, they've just been good. He's made some really good lemonade out of some moldy lemons. He turned Dubois into a huge haul. Kupari, the pick. You got Iafallo out there, who's been fantastic as a middle six option. You brought in Velarde, who's been great on the power play. And so, I look at some of these moves and I think he's generally had good summers. But I also think that in other ways, I agree with the comment that we're waiting for a signature moment for Chevy that kind of matches up to this Dubois deal, right? You've had one of these every so often, but you want a big moment that's really like the Jets kind of stunting on the league and showing that they're not afraid to dance with anyone. And I think Winnipeg has done that a couple of times. I think this summer could be when they really shoot for the moon and do something big. I think there's a lot more pressure than there's been in previous years. I think Winnipeg finally having a real taste of playoff success has everyone hot and bothered for more. And if I'm me, as a fan, I'm hoping the Jets swing for the moon. But let me know what you're thinking about. Are you expecting a moonshot from this team? Do you think we're going to be disappointed? What is your prioritization for Winnipeg's offseason? Drop your thoughts and comments below or at my social media at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that's all the time that we have. I thank you so much for listening and making us your first listen of the day every day. We'll see you back here tomorrow to close out the week and hopefully with some really cool news updates and maybe even a Jets extension. But for tonight's show, all the time that we have. See you tomorrow. Have a great night. And as always, go Jets go.